let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're breaking down a truly terrifying piece of microfiction called The Girl in the Corner. It's a fantastic example of horror without monsters. Well, not the traditional kind anyway. Much like the best Gothic literary works, think of Helen Oyeyemi's White is for Witching. This story relies heavily on haunted architecture to evoke fear. It's all about incredible atmospheric and psychological tension. So let's unpack exactly how it builds that unbelievable suspense.
To really understand how this story hooks us, we have to put ourselves right in the protagonist's shoes. I mean, ask yourself, would you ignore a strange, creepy warning if it meant incredibly cheap rent? The author sets this trap up perfectly. The story begins with the promise of a cozy, top-floor apartment in an old building for literally half the price of the protagonist's previous place. And what do? They sign the lease immediately. We've all been there, right? The story brilliantly overrides our basic human caution with a highly relatable practical motivation.
Section 1. The Too Good Deal. Setting the groundwork.
Okay, picture this. Just as the protagonist gets the keys to their amazing new apartment, a frail receptionist with tired eyes looks at them, her polite smile completely vanishes, and she delivers this incredibly ominous line. Please, do not disturb the door with no number on your floor. Boom. We've just introduced the classic forbidden space trope right into the narrative. But the protagonist? I just kind of shrug it off as odd, totally blinded by that half-price rent. The seed of dread is successfully planted.
Section 2. The Forbidden Door. The Escalation of Curiosity. It's really fascinating how this story captures the escalation of simple, everyday human curiosity. Step 1, as we discussed, is the immediate signing of the lease. Step 2 is a buffer period. For the first week, the protagonist is just way too busy unpacking boxes and starting a new job to care about some weird warning. The horror is placed entirely on the back burner. But then we hit step 3. It's Friday night, you're bored. And this perfectly shows us how idle time inevitably leads to rule breaking. That festering curiosity finally pushes our protagonist out of their safe apartment and into the dark hallway.
Notice how the author isolates the physical attributes of this forbidden space. It's a textbook haunted architecture trope. The apartment is exactly at the end of the hallway, right next door. But unlike a normal door, it's just plain dark wood. No number, no peephole, no brass nameplate. And, of course, the knob is securely locked. It's literally a blank space in the building, just begging to be investigated. And then, the protagonist notices a tiny gap, a keyhole covered by a slightly turned brass plate.
Section 3. The First Look. Building the tension.
So, the crucial point here is when the protagonist actually gets down on their knees to peek through that tiny gap. Now, logically, you'd expect an empty, abandoned room, right? Maybe some dust, some old furniture covered in sheets. But nope. The reality is an identical room to their own, except it's painted a sickening shade of yellow. The lights are off, casting this weird, dingy glow. The author totally subverts our logical assumption with this jarring, unsettling reality that instantly heightens the psychological tension. Because it's not empty at all. Inside that sickeningly yellow room, there's someone else. The protagonist sees a woman in the corner. She is standing completely still, with her back to the door. She has long, black hair, and her skin is described very specifically as pale and waxy. It's such an incredibly eerie, unnatural image. What's really brilliant here is how the author uses these isolating sensory details to make the protagonist suddenly feel like a total creep, like a voyeur inappropriately spying on a vulnerable neighbor in the dark. That sudden rush of guilt forces a temporary, panicked retreat back to safety.
Section 4. Seeing red. The climax.
But of course, curiosity strikes again. The very next day, the protagonist convinces themselves they were just imagining things. They go back into the hallway. They get down on their knees, and they look through the keyhole one more time. But this time, the sickening yellow room and the waxy woman are entirely gone. Instead, the text reads, "All I saw was red. Just red." It's a sudden, deeply claustrophobic visual shift. There is no wall, there is no painting. It is just a deep, dark red covering their entire field of vision. Now, how does the human brain handle something so inexplicably weird? With instant rationalization. The protagonist stands up, literally shaking, and thinks, oh, she's decorating. She must have put up red wallpaper right over the keyhole. This brilliant little detail shows exactly how our minds desperately try to protect us from immediate horror. We invent mundane excuses to avoid facing the truth that something is deeply, deeply wrong.
Section 5. The gruesome truth. The twist. Seeking answers, the protagonist goes downstairs to complain to the receptionist. Her polite smile completely vanishes the second she realizes her strict warning was ignored. She sighs, a sound that the author beautifully describes as draining the very air from the room, and she delivers this grim history. Years ago, a man murdered his wife in that room. He was insane. The police found him standing in the corner holding his dead wife's hand. When they finally broke down the door, the room was covered in blood, red everywhere. This brutal history instantly reframes everything the protagonist thought they saw that first night.
But she doesn't stop there, and this is where the true horror locks into place. She describes the murdered couple for the protagonist. They were pale and waxy, exactly like the woman standing in the corner. And then she pauses, looks the protagonist straight in the eyes, and delivers the final chilling detail. They didn't have eyes, just holes where their eyes used to be.
This is the ultimate payoff, what we call the red reveal. The horrifying realization hits like an absolute ton of bricks. That deep, dark red covering their entire field of vision wasn't wallpaper, it wasn't fresh paint, it was the bloody, empty, eyeless socket of the ghostly woman. She had moved from the corner of the room directly to the door, and she was staring right back through the keyhole at point-blank range. The watcher was actually the one being watched. Absolute chills.
The narrative concludes absolutely perfectly. I haven't gone back to my apartment. I'm writing this from a hotel room, and I think I'll just skip the rest of my lease. It's such a highly practical, beautifully grounded response to the supernatural. Forget the cheap rent, forget the unpacked boxes and the new job. The author proves that sometimes the absolute best and only way to handle a haunted space is simply to run away and never look back.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. If a door in your building had no number and a terrible history, what would you see if you looked through the keyhole right now? It's a fantastic reminder of how incredibly powerful atmospheric horror and unchecked curiosity can be. Thanks for exploring this one with us. Stay curious out there, but maybe just keep away from the unmarked door.